Okay, thank you very much. Look, it's a great privilege to be invited to this high-powered group of philatelists to talk about Nicaragua, and I thank you very much. I do apologise that this will be in English, and I hope you understand my Australian English. But if you have problems, Henry, please stop and maybe translate for me. So thank you very much. All right, so just a little bit about myself for those people who don't know me. I'm from Australia. The photograph, the drawing on the right-hand side is a picture that was in a paper when I was 30 years old, so I quite like that caricature. So a bit about myself. I'm current president of the Nicaraguan study group. We have 56 active members in that group. I started exhibiting seriously in about 2000, year 2000. And what I exhibit, mainly Nicaraguan, but a few other things. So I do the postal stationery, and tonight I'm going to talk about the CBEC part of that. I do Nicaraguan airmail, which is really the first thing I started collecting. I do Nicaraguan traditional, so the stamps and officials of both the CBEC period and the gold currency overprints. I've got a couple of one-framers that I work on the traditional side of the 400th anniversary of the commemorative of Leon and Granada. Also the Waterloo officials, the one frame on that. I do also do Siam postal stationery. Because I'm a Western Australian, I do some military mail, the postal history of Western Australia. And I collect Bolivian revenues and hope to be exhibiting those very shortly. As far as my CV, I'm a current international judge of both FIP and FIAP. So FIAP's the Asian group where Australia and New Zealand's part of. I'm also a national judge. I'm on the executive for FIAP. So I'm not the president or vice president, but I'm one of the voices on FIAP. I'm an international officer for the Australian Philatelic Federation and also past president. I'm a member of both the Royal of London and the Royal of Victoria. I've been collecting since I was 17 years old, seriously, and my profession is medical imaging, and I've been involved with that for 40 years. And since my hobby is keeping me poor, I'll still need to work for another 10 years. So I'm going to talk about Nicaraguan postal stationery. I'm breaking it down, just a little bit of introduction. I'm going to talk a bit about CBEC. I've had a look at a few of the YouTubes on your YouTube channel, and I know CBEC comes up in a lot of those, so I'm not going to spend too much time on him. I'll talk about the contract that was signed between Nicaragua and Hamilton Banknote Company. Lobenheimer, who did some of the dies for the stationery for Hamilton Banknote Company, we'll talk about him. And then I'll go through my exhibit showing the period between 1890 and 1899. So in the beginning, basically in 1878, the first domestic postal stationery card was produced, and that was done through the American Banknote Company. I think around that time they were producing postal stationeries for a lot. Nicaragua didn't join the UPU until 1882, and then produced their first international postal card in 1884. They then had a new design in 1888, and then their first postal stationery envelope came around 1888. So in 1889, Nicholas CBEC went to Nicaragua and signed a 10-year contract to supply both stamps, officials, and postal stationery for a 10-year contract. So just a quick summary of Nicholas CBEC. So this is a photograph of him when he was 23 years old. He was an established stationer and stamp dealer in New York City. And he basically had a shop on on Vesey Street. And I was in New York in 2016 for the show, and I went down there, and lo and behold, there still is a stationery shop, Staples, right on that corner. So obviously history keeps repeating itself. I quite enjoyed my time down there. And this is a card from Seebeck showing that he did reside at 3 Vesey Street. It also shows that he was an engraver, lithographer. He made books and manufacturing. But on the right-hand side, you can start to see his interest in selling postage stamps. So he was a stamp dealer even through that early stationery side of everything. This is his first stamp catalogue that he produced in 1876. And it believe it to be a generic catalogue where he would sell it to other stamp dealers and print their name on it so they could send it to their customers. So I think this is when he seriously started looking at the bigger picture for selling postage stamps by producing his own catalogue. In late 1878, he travelled to the Dominican Republic and come up with the idea of maybe producing stamps for some of the South American countries. He produced his first lot of stamps in 1879 for the Dominican Republic and also for the Colombian state of Bolivia. And there's a picture of me in 97 Wall Street, where the Hamilton Banknote Company had its printing press and office. So as far as the contract, and I think the contract was fairly similar in other countries that they produce. So the main crux of it with these countries was that he would supply all the stamps and stationery free of charge. So that was his concept, is helping out the poorer countries and saying, look, I'm going to supply you with a stamp. What he wanted to do was to issue a new issue every year for those 10 years. And then during the time that the new stamps come out, the old stamps were invalid or demonetized. So, and then he would sell those stamps to collectors. He would make sure that they had a supply of stamps before the year that they were issued. So he said he'd have them all delivered by the 15th of November. He would also promise to print everything in engrave on steel and have high quality artisanship. Look, I believe that most of his stamps were well produced, but he did let the stationery side down by actually not steel engraving, but often using stone litho. So the quality of the stationery did diminish compared to a lot of the stamps, which was a little bit sad. But Seebeck wanted something in return for all that free postage of delivering, not only printing, but delivering free of charge. So he asked for all their remainder stocks of all the stuff before 1890, of which he could also sell to collectors. He sought permission to be able to reprint if there wasn't enough stock to supply the world. He had this feeling that if the Nicaraguan used all the stamps, then he wouldn't have a supply of mint or used stamps to sell. So therefore, he got permission to reprint as long as he used the same dies. He wouldn't allow them to discount their stamps. He didn't want Nicaraguan to be a stamp dealer themselves. So the bulk discount that they could give at any time would be 10% for stamps. And that would stop stamp dealers trying to buy directly from Nicaragua and on-sell it to their collectors. Of course, if the Hamilton Banknote Company failed to deliver on time, that there was a clause that the Nicaragua could actually cancel the contract. If there was not sufficient stamps and stationery for that year, that they could reorder up to 1 million pieces. So if they were stamps or stationery, anything up to 1 million pieces could be reordered during that year. There was valid for 10 years, and it could have been cancelled mutually at any time. And some of the countries that did sign up did cancel over a period of time. And it was really just Nicaragua and El Salvador that saw out the 10-year contract. And would the contracts have gone into the new year if it wasn't for the death of Nicholas Seebeck in 1899? It's possible that those contracts may have been renewed. We'll never know. So in the contract, and if you look at the Higgins and Gage, which is no longer the relevant stationery catalogue, but just it says that there was 41 envelopes produced over that 10-year period. There was 26 wrappers and 40 postal cards. So as we've gone through and done more study, we think there's a little bit more than that, but I'll show that as we go along. Just recently, Ross Towell and myself wrote an article about Rudolf Laubenheimer, and it came that when we were in New York in 2016, I bought some proofs off Brian Morehouse, the late Brian Morehouse, and I wasn't too sure where these proofs came from, and Ross said that these were actually sold from the Laubenheimer archive sale of 2015. So I went back to that auction and went through it, and then found all the proofs that I currently own that were actually by Laubenheimer. And then Ross and I wrote this article that we put together. And one of the interesting things that noted, and Mike Schreiber is the editor of the Nicaraguan, our journal, he states that Laubenheimer also did some die work for Hamilton Banknote for other countries, including Honduras and El Salvador. So it'd be interesting to find out which one of those proofs that and items that he actually did. So for those that are interested in the articles, I've written 3, 2 with Ross and 1 by myself. If anyone wants to email me or email Henry and email me, I'm happy to send these articles on to you. I think it's pretty impressive. This being a recent discovery, because up until 2016, I haven't heard of Laubenheimer, and in fact, none of the Nicaraguan study group had even tied it together. So it's amazing what we do find as we continue to research. And also Guillermo, he had contacted me and wanted a list of all my proofs, and I believe that he's putting together a census of all the Hamilton Banknote Company dies and proofs. So soon to be published. I've got a copy of the spreadsheet, but I'm not too sure when he's publishing it.
It was published in January, Glen, in the London Philatelic.
Thank you very much. You can see I'm behind in my reading of the London Philatelic, so I will dig that one up. Thank you. A little bit about him. He was born in Germany. He moved at the age of 17 over to the United States, and one of the articles I read is to make some money on that ship journey, he would do caricatures of passengers on the ship and sold them. And so even at an early age, he was a very artistic fellow and was able to make money just on quickly drawing things. He was employed by engraving for John Hull Sr., where he applied his apprenticeship through. And very shortly after that, in 1858, he started his own business as a cameo die sink and medal maker. And that's his business card on the bottom right-hand corner. He married Henrietta. They had 5 sons, but only one of them survived past the age of 12. But his son did carry on the tradition as an engraver while not working for his father, but for other companies. And eventually it was his grandson that ended up selling all the archive material that was kept in the family. Rudolph also obtained American citizenship in 1866. One of the articles, he designed the dies in 1870 for the George Ray envelopes. And you can see there's a letter there that's been written by the 3rd Assistant Postmaster General. He was so impressed with Rudolph's ability to create beautiful dies that he wrote in this letter. And basically he said that the dies executed by you for a new series of stamped envelopes are so beautifully and faithfully executed. What magnificent words are they? I cannot refrain from expressing my high appreciation. So at all stages, the work that Laubenheimer had done was always of a high standard, and you can see that through the dies and proofs through my exhibit. So I'm just going to start and go through a couple of things on the business envelope. So everything started in 1890 with Seebeck and the Hamilton Banknote Company. You can see the first set of proofs here these are the ones I purchased from Brian. So these are the business envelope. They're steel engraved proofs. They're beautiful. But when you look at the envelope, these are litho. So within the first year, Nicholas wasn't sticking to the contract, but of course, Nicaraguan just kept going along. One of the things I wanted to point out is there's a bit of a bump here that he did on the business envelopes. But when you see the wrappers, he's actually just put that as a straight line. So there's some distinct differences between. He never liked to just keep everything the same. On the bottom left-hand corner, you can see the numbers that were issued each year. And as you can see with these business envelopes, so we're talking 20, 30, and 50 centimes. Centavos. These were low numbers. 100,000 of the locally rated 5 centavos, 25,000 for the foreign rate envelope, and just 500 of 20, 30, and 50. So very extremely low numbers. And to date, we don't have a record of any usage of these 3 business envelopes. So we run a census in the Nicaraguan study group that every time there's a new business envelope that comes up, we record it and we know exactly the numbers that are out there. So if you're hiding one of these, please let me know. There'll be a lot of people eager to purchase these ones. So this is a letter from the UPU. You can see this is from the UPU. It's Bulletin 5/11/35. And this is basically saying from Nicaraguan what you're going to get. And normally 3 of each item is sent to each of the UPU countries, and there were about 77 at this particular time. But as you notice down here, there was just single numbers, and you can see it's 1, 2, 5, and 10 peso stamps because there wasn't a lot of those issued. Of course, the 1, 2, 5, and 10 official stamps, there was just one. But look at the business envelopes, just one of the 20, 30, and 50 centavos. Again, I think they produced them but weren't expecting them to be used. And of course, there's a lot of mint ones around. That means a lot of collectors got them, but very few were used. So from that circular, you can see 3 each of the 2 cent plus 2 cent reply postal card, the 3 cent postal card, the 3 plus 3 reply card, 3 each of the 5 and 10 cent envelopes, and 1 each of the 1, 2, and 3 each of the wrappers, and 1 of only the 20, 30, and 50 centavos business envelopes. So here we have the first of the domestic and foreign envelopes. So 5 centavos with the specimen, same with the 10. These were UPU identifications. These are the mint ones. And then you can see local usage. So from Nicaraguan, it was regarded that you would get local postage within Nicaragua and what they call adjacent Central American countries. But in fact, I think all of them, not just the ones that were adjacent, but all the Central American countries were able to get local rates. However, this one's got a tax of 10 centavos, and I'm pretty sure that's because this was overweighted. It was greater than 15 grams, and that wasn't taxed because it was meant to be foreign rate. And there's typically a foreign one over to Germany and Hamburg. The next thing that I just want to allude to is on both the 5 and 10 centavo envelopes, you can see the gum is different. This has got a bit of an arch here on the 5 centavo. The gum here is sort of more flat, a little bit more rounded here. So this is the first indication that these envelopes weren't printed in sheets, cut and folded, that envelopes were purchased and the indices then printed on there. But there's no way of proving that on this particular envelope. But just the fact that the gum is different, why would Hamilton Banknote produce 2 different gum styles for the same equivalent size envelope? So the suspicion here is that these were envelopes pre-purchased and then the indices printed on them. Here is the 3 proofs done by Laubenheimer, family again. As you can see, it's got the flat top to it and the lovely wrappers. And wrappers are something that's interested to me, so I'm very keen to get as many of these as I can. And I believe that I have about 50% of the world known wrappers of usage. Again, these are the specimens. This is a hand stamp specimen stamp produced by the Hamilton Banknote Company to send to the UPU countries, but also their salesmen, including Nicholas Seebeck, would use this specimen hand stamp just for showing the wares and the quality of each of their stamps. Again, the 10-cent foreign rate, as you can see, I've got one here, and you can see this is a par favor. So it wasn't uncommon for philatelists to just ask for a cancelled postal stationery, which has not actually been through the postage itself. So we're always looking for back marks, etc., to prove that anything that went through the post. And here's a nice one off to via Corrento to Dundee for the 10 centavo. Here we have the 3 business envelopes. Again, we haven't seen any usage of the 1891. As you can see, these plate-proof trial colours are all steel engraved and were used for the postage stamp. But look at the quality now that they've gone on to the stationery. Again, these were stone lithoed, poor quality. These weren't done by Lobenheimer, so anything that was a stamp and then stationery was done in-house with the Hamilton Banknote Company, and that's why the quality is quite poor. Had this been Lobenheimer, then these dies would have been far more impressive. There was 2 lots of envelopes used for the 5 centavo local rate. There was a yellow and a sort of beige. Both of them have usage, so these weren't reprints in that, one was sent to Nicaragua and the other was reprinted. They were both used in Nicaragua. Again, looking at the size of this envelope, you can see it's 150 by 87. This one's 160 by 90. Definitely another indication that these envelopes weren't cut in the factory, that these were pre-ordered envelopes with the printed indicia. There was a discovery that Mike Schreiber found on some of these beige envelopes, that the top right-hand corner had a chamfer or an angle on it compared to the right angles or the square corners of the originals. So since we haven't seen any usage of these envelopes, and these envelopes are readily available everywhere, that these were definitely reprinted for the collector's market. So not sure why a different die was used, or whether this was retouched when they went to print it, but definitely that chamfered corner indicate that these were reprinted just for the collector's market. The 91 wrappers, and as you can see, there's not a lot of these used wrappers around, and we record all of these, and as you can see, there's only 3 of the 2 centavos and only 3 of the 1 centavo local rate as well. So not too common to find these. So for 1892, again, the stamp was different. So we know that this die was produced by Leibenheimer, and these actually come out of the family archives again. But note here that the actual proof itself is a litho proof. So I think Rudolph actually realized that they were going to lithograph these and didn't do a steel engrave. But even for a litho, these are magnificently reproduced indicias compared to the 1891, which was done in-house at the Hamilton Banknote. So for those who probably don't realize, but I'm definitely a fan of the work of Rudolf Lobenheimer. Here's some local and foreign usage on each of these envelopes. Again, the business envelopes, and you can see there must have been some reprints on this, because this is the first lot that comes through, and you can see it's a nice crisp indicia. And when you look at usage, that's what it looks like. These ones are different papers, different sizes, and not quite the sharpness. So I think the wear of the stone and the lack of care that the Hamilton banknote took to make reprints for the collector's market. These are the wrappers that were produced, again, superbly produced wrappers. Here is a couple of usage. I always love when something is uprated. You can see this is going from local usage to overseas. Very nice. Again, a par favour, so it's not uncommon to see these. We don't record par favours or CTO as part of usage unless they've gone through the post and have a back stamp. So in 1893, Rudolph actually put a set of essays together to be used, but they weren't accepted by Hamilton banknote. These were intelligo essays of the die proofs, and you can see he made them with and without the value imprints. And also in these proofs, the master dies are numbered. So in this case, this is 588, and that's in the record showing that these came. So we regard these as unadopted essays that could have been used but weren't used for the. In fact, they used the stamps themselves. So this was done in-house, and it wasn't uncommon for Hamilton banknote to produce these what we call composites, where they would get 2, 3, or 4 of the die proofs and put them on a card and send them out. And as you can see, each of those also have either a scratching or a number indicating the die numbers for these. So these were produced for the stamps and faithfully reproduced on the envelope. So you can see here, these are in pretty good condition. And again, this is local usage. We then go for the foreign rate, so a bit of foreign usage. And the business side, this is the first time that they started indicating a different size for the business envelopes. Again, the wrappers, same period, and as you can see, very low numbers, 5 known and 7 known of usage of these wrappers. Again, being uprated, one of my favourite things that I like to see. So 1894, again, the stamps and the envelopes were the same die. These are the actual trial proofs of the actual stamps, but they're exactly the same as the stationery as well. Still no increase in numbers, and reprints were readily available in these items as well. So here we've got local usage, quite easy to find. Often the foreign rate usage is the more difficult items to accumulate, and we're always chasing more foreign rate. Typically, most letters would go to the US, to Germany, the UK, or to France. Seem to be the main areas. There was a large German population. We do find a lot of letters. Here's the 1894 wrappers, and now it's starting to change the theme a little bit. This was a bit more of a professional wrapper, where they've now got a rounded edge and gummed on here, and this is the first time and only time that they used watermark paper, and this paper just says standard number 1. Not too sure where this paper is. I haven't seen this on any other stationery item before, but these were definitely watermarked stationery newspaper wrappers. So another die that was produced by Rudolf Lobenheimer. These are very nice proofs that he produced. You can see each of those don't have a value tab, and the value tab was then added to the right and left hand side. So you got 50 centavos, 30 and 20. This is the first time I show a business envelope usage. Of course, people collected postage stamps back then, so this stamp is missing. I wish it wasn't, but since these stamps, there's only 6 of these envelopes known or recorded by the Nicaraguan study group. I have to show what I have. So here's showing original and a reprint, and you can see 2 things, 2 different types of envelopes were used between the original and the reprints, and also the color of the ink was different. So as you can see, the only way we know which is the correct envelope for that wasn't reprinted is just purely by usage. So if it's been used, that's the original. If it's not being used, then that becomes the reprint. Now, one thing, and it was only, I think 2 or 3 Zoom presentations ago, I was talking with Ross Towle about these envelopes. And he said, look, if you could find an indicia that's come through the envelope, you know that these were on pre-printed envelope. And so I went through my collection, and lo and behold, he was right. There it is there. You can see that this indicia here has been stamped all the way through to here. So therefore, these weren't produced and cut and folded. These were produced individually on individual envelopes that was ordered. So this is the first proof that I now have, and now I have to go about to write this up with Ross about these envelopes. Again, showing foreign usage. And we're starting to come to the point where in business people are registering things, so these business envelopes then get uprated. And it's sad that they're using the 10 centavo. If they'd just used the 20 or 30 or 50, we might have had a few more along, but they didn't see it necessary to do that. Here we have the coat of arms wrappers, so the die that was produced. So here's the 1, the 2, and the 4 centavo wrapper. We have one that says this is the angulation of the number 1. As you can see, this one is quite small, this one is quite large. I believe that this was produced, and these are actually empty value tabs. So it's not a 1, but it's more like you could put a 1, 2, or 4 into that. And this got released. There's no any usage seen on this, but people have recorded as a number 1, as 1 centavo, where I think this was just produced as showing the value tabs more than anything else. Again, as you can see, 9 known, 8 known, only 5 known of each of these. Very, very difficult to find these wrappers. And now we come into 1896 and 1897. Nicholas Seebeck had started to find it was getting costly to produce these for countries, so he was going to reproduce the same envelope, the same postal card, but what he'll do is just change the year date. So Lobenheimer developed these dies. You can see again rose and carmine, so there was a lot of reprints of this particular envelope, and you'll notice that the actual the number 5, the die weakens under here, but eventually you'll see some reprints where they've corrected those. So this is my next business envelope that I have. No missing stamps, so at least this is a good one. So showing where only 5 known of this 20 centavos. And what's interesting to me is it was actually in a Bluefields post office, because the theory was that most of these just sat in Managua and Corinto, and they weren't sent out to the smaller post offices, but this actually proves that that wasn't the case. Again, 10 centavos for the foreign rate, and there's foreign usage shown. The numeral wrappers. And then in 1897, so all that really changed with the 2 dates here from 1896 to 1897. You can see a little bit of an improvement on the die here and here. And this is showing local usage. And again, that we have an uprated foreign rate, again, uprated and registered, and then just the 10 centavo foreign envelope. So in 1897, I have another business envelope, and of course there's only 5 of these known, but this is missing a postage stamp here and a postage stamp there. So I would say all of these were sweated off for collectors, because when you think 1897, stationery wasn't a big area. So just 500 of these business envelopes were produced, but of course more of them were reprinted. And if you look at the original die here, and now on the reprint, they tried to repair this. So the reprint actually has the better indicia on. So be careful. Make sure you buy, if you want the original, you buy the one with the missing part of the bottom frame there. Again, another rounded flap on the wrappers, and of course the wrappers also were reprinted in great numbers, showing actual usage on the wrappers. So 1898, this business envelope is a recent purchase of mine. This is the only known 50 centavos. I'm always proud to have the only known. It was registered. It was AR as well, and paid the correct rate. So this is the period where we had the Greater Republic of Central America, and I think you guys have spoken about this a lot. So there was just few of the Central American countries that got together, actually put that title into their stamps and stationery, but the whole thing fell apart in about 18 months and was no longer part of it. But even each of the councillors that they used in Nicaragua, and I wrote a piece on when the post offices started using this Greater Republic of Central America on their postmarks, and some of them started using them after it all fell apart, because it took them that long to actually produce a steel postmarker for the smaller post offices. So that in itself is a very interesting study. So then there is the 5 centavo local usage and 10 centavo foreign rate. And 1899 was the end part of the contract. However, there was no envelopes produced for 1899. So there was a feeling that things were falling apart between Hamilton Banknote and Nicaraguan. Of course, in 1899 is when Nicholas died, and that might have been his ailing health that was causing some of the issues. But with the postal cards, they did carry on. So here's again showing the wrappers, and as you can see, there's late usage. Here's October 1899 on the 1898 envelopes, and really these should have all gone back to Nicholas Seebeck to be sold, but these obviously there were sufficient quantities for Nicaraguan to keep, and they kept using those. We'll now move on to the postal cards, which is the last part of this talk. I'm a little bit excited because this is a new discovery. As far as proof postal cards, there is only a few known, and I think there's 6 now recorded. I have 3 of them. One of them comes from Bill Welch's collection, which is this one. It's blue and gold, so it's not the right color. And as you can see, it's horribly cut. So these have been cut with scissors. So a good indication that the proofs were done singly and cut by scissors and not put in the guillotine. So this is the blue and gold. There is actually 2 of these, brown and lilac. So Mike Schreiber and myself have the 2. And this one is a new one. I'm calling it blue and gray. And I'm sorry, we use the E for gray, not A. And so that now gives me 3 of the out of the 6 proofs for the stationery. They did use the indicia for the stamps, and this was regarded as the train and Morse code series that came out. Again, the specimen stamps that were applied, these were hand stamps applied by Hamilton Banknote and sent as for UPU identification and for salesmen when they were selling their wares. And And of course, they produce both the single postcard and the reply postcard. And the poster card, like the holy grail for a reply postcard, is to get one in piece that has been sent somewhere and returned. And to this date, none has been seen by the Nicaraguan study group. So that's the one item that we're chasing, is a reply card that's actually come back to Nicaragua, or come back to the sender and is in one piece. It's nice to get very early usage, and particularly the first day of use, so I show that. This specimen here was neither for UPU or salesman. It was done to be sent to all the postmaster as what they call a New Year's Eve. There was a series of stamps and postal cards to show what the new issues were going to look like. And obviously someone's broken into this set and posted it in May. So officially this shouldn't have been used, but it has been. So it's always a nice talking point to have. We do see the first of the flaws in this work, and here we have the 2 centavo local rate card. You can see it quite clearly here, but I've just magnified it there, that there's actually a break in this frame. And since we have 4 recorded usages, these are not reprints, but this is part of the block of cards that were made, and obviously that's where there was a flaw in that. We don't know how many cards were printed and then guillotined. We're not even sure what format, but at least we can tell. So this is another recent discovery in the last 10 years by Michael Shriver, and has been documented, and lucky enough for me to find one in usage. We've got the 3 centavo again, foreign rate, foreign destination. And as you can see here, I show a poorly guillotined card. So Hamilton banknote weren't really known for good quality assurance in their printing process. This is extremely recent discovery. This is the first proof card that I have of the 3 centavo value. And how do we know it's proof? Well, of course, the giveaway is that these have been cut with a pair of scissors. And you notice there is in the final version, there's a border around the stamp, and there is actually nothing here. And this is the second one discovered. So Mike Shriver discovered the first one. I was able to acquire the second one in an auction. And so these are the only 2 known proofs. And considering that these were produced, in 1890 or probably 1889, not to be discovered until the last 6 months is sort of pretty incredible. So therefore we're always seeing new and new discoveries in Nicaraguan philately, and that's one of the things I really enjoy with Nicaraguan philately. Again, we're showing the postal cards of 1891. They again, the single card, the reply card, and you notice the reply cards, all they've done is scored them so they can be folded. And then of course this is usage showing these postal cards going over to foreign destinations. Here we have 2 reply cards. And one of the things that's very frustrating is because of the German population in Nicaragua, they would often buy these foreign reply cards and write a complete letter left to right on both sides. Then they would turn the cards at 90 degrees and carry on the letter in tiny writing up and down. And on the odd occasion, they then wrote more at 45 degrees. So almost three messages all on one card. So for 6 centavo, they didn't have to buy an envelope. There was a cheap rate to get it to Germany, and they didn't need to buy a stamp. So it's not uncommon to see these reply cards to be used just solely to get their messages over to their families in Germany. And we now come over to the 1892, the Colombo sighting issue. Again, as you can see with poor guillotine, this does give us an indication that the cards were printed test by test, where one was one way, one was the other way, only because of the imprint for the Hamilton Banknote Company down here. But we still have no evidence exactly how it was produced. So these are two cards. So Guillermo and Michael Ho, one is Salvador and the other is Honduras, showing complete cards with the reply card and the single card on the same, which sort of indicates that these were done in sheets at the same time. And we don't have any of that evidence with Nicaragua. And in fact, we've never seen anything like this. So that's something that we're still searching for to find out exactly what we can guess on how our cards were produced. Here we again have local usage of the cards. A typical card being back stamped, but on the way out, not being sent back. Another one with the entire card as the message, just showing a mint card. And this is the first time that the Hamilton banknote actually perforated along the reply card to make it easier to tear off and return it. So all the others were scored. So this is the first time that we've actually come up with this perforation. This cancelled card was also done by Hamilton Banknote Company as more of a salesman's sample that would be sent off. Showing local usage. This is quite interesting that these have German field post markings from World War I. So there was supply of mint cards available. Mike shows that a lot of American companies bought these cards and put messages on and put American stamps over. And here, obviously, in World War I, with a shortage of material to write back home to your families, these were used up out in the field. So just an interesting sideline to usage. So 1893, again, reply cards of the 2 centavo and showing usage. Again, the local cards showing usage and uprated. Another card that's headed off to New York and not returned. And then, of course, these 3 centavo and their reply cards. And here's showing some usage. I love this late, you know, when it can't quite get it on the boat in time and getting that late to indicate that compared to the time that it left, that it may not be there at a reasonable time. In 1894, the Hamilton Banknote Company used to be on their indices, the Hamilton Banknote Engraving and Printing Company of New York. And halfway through issuing these cards, they changed their name to Hamilton Banknote Company, New York. So these are the original ones that went to Nicaragua. These were the reprinted ones with the new ones, and we don't see any usage of these Hamilton Banknote, the new indices. It looks a bit better on the 3 centavos. You can see it a lot clearer here. You know, Engraving and Printing Company, and now it's become the Banknote Company of New York. So with the name change, so was their business name on each of these. So this is the first printing, which includes that, and you can see usage. This is the second printing, which goes out to the collector's market. Again, showing usage of the foreign rate. Oh, and this is the only one that I have going to Australia. So there's not a lot of Nicaraguan people writing to Australia. The 1895, again, a composite die proof, which was common with Hamilton Banknote Company. And this was used for both stamps and stationery. So we now show it on the stationery. This is the local 2 centavo rate. 2 centavos showing usage, and again a par favor reply card. This is the 3 centavos as you can see, still perforating the reply cards. Now showing foreign usage. This one's a nice one to Morocco, and there is this triangle T mark, which I still can't work out. I don't believe it to be a tax mark, because this is really 3 centavos, which is the foreign rate, so it's the correct rate. And maybe it's a transitional mark, or maybe this is a Tangier mark. So if anyone knows anything on that, I'd love to hear what that is. So in 1896, again, two lots of cards were produced. You can tell where this R for Republica, there's a real fuzzy edge here, and on the original was just a little bit. So this is the second printing, the first printing, and you can see the usages on this second printing here has got sent over, and I've just highlighted the difference here. That's on the 2 centavos. The same 2 printing happened on 3 centavos, and you can see it's really above the 3 on the extra lines that they've put in here above the 3 centavos to show exactly what's happening here. And on the left-hand side, again, is composite. And often these composites were done in black, red, and blue. So typically it's 3 on each time that they do something like this. Another cancelled card as a salesman's specimen. And this is another discovery that Mike Schreiber found. He really puts a lot of work into studying these cards. And the frame itself, this leafy flourish, ends on the vertical frame here, but not on this one. So, and we haven't seen usage on this. So this is probably an indication of the reprinted unit. So again, sometimes there's subtle changes between the original that went to Nicaragua and the ones that got reprinted for the collectors. 1897, typically just changed the year like they did with the stamps and with the envelopes. And this time, the reprint, actually the errors in the frame has changed here, showing different border positions on this frame in itself. So this is a good indication. So this is a recent discovery as well. So, you know, more than 100 years later, we're starting to work out. And I think a lot of the issues was people didn't study Seebeck items because they thought that he ruined the collector's market and people stopped collecting, and if people stopped collecting, they stopped studying. And I think it's only this new generation which has a new love of Seebeck stationery and stamp stuff. So we're now getting close to the end. So 1898, again, this is Greater Republic of Central America, set of composite die proofs, and the stationery card, a local rate in both single and reply cards. Of course, in 1898, there is 2 different cards that got printed, or on the same run, so it could be the same printing, and it's all to do with the note that's at the bottom left-hand corner, that the O in this note is circular, where the O here is oval on the bottom one, and also the dots under the T here is in the middle of the T, where they're closer to the top of the T here. So two easy recognizable printings that you can see on this 1898 card. And of course, foreign usage by uprating. And then the 3 centavo foreign card also, and this has got a nice view showing the Port of Corinto as well, where most of the mail went out. So 1899, they did produce postal cards, again using the same Port of Corinto here, using the stamps that were produced, so the indicia from the stamps, and showing the standard rate with reply card, showing the foreign rate with reply card, and showing usage. And because the cards were kept once the contract finished, that these were revalidated later on. So you can see here revalidated in 1904. These two here, these also revalidated. So there's quite a few of these around. So they definitely used them all. As you can see, usage showing the revalidation on these cards right up until, so this is showing they kept the 1898 cards as well as the 1899 and revalidated these, and you can see it's got the 1899 stamp on here for uprating. And here's very late usage in 1908 showing the overprinted revenue stamps that were put on here. So I think that's enough from me, Henry. So I'm happy to pass it over, answer any questions, and hopefully I haven't put you guys to sleep.
It was a great presentation, Glenn. Thank you. We really enjoy it.
Thank you.
At this point, if there are any questions for Glenn, please raise your virtual hand. Mauricio.
First of all, Glenn, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I did notice something. Well, I collect Honduras, and I was noting that in the examples that you presented, there were no, if I watch everything correctly, no letters from Nicaragua to Honduras in stationery, which actually kind of confirms what we have seen with Honduran mail to Nicaragua on that period, that is virtually non-existent. That's an interesting thing that I found out in your presentation. So just to congratulate you again and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Look, I agree. We've seen very few mail addressed to Honduras, and I don't know why, whether there was a regime problem, between the presidents, or whether the post just found it very difficult to get there, or there was no connection. It's really difficult to just guess what the reasons are, but it is interesting that you also confirm that you haven't seen Nicaraguan stuff sent, as we haven't seen Honduras stuff sent to Nicaragua either.
Yeah, very few. We have seen to Europe and US a lot, like the one that you just showed in the case of Nicaragua, but within Central America, it's quite scarce actually to find letters of that period.
And also around that time, the population of Nicaragua was about 250,000, and only 87,000 registered voters. So it's probably the amount of people that could write was minimal. So there wasn't a lot. And of course, there was the Germans over there with the coffee plantations. The Americans are there with the banana plantations, which is what they treated Nicaraguan, just as a plantation country. We just send all the stuff back to our countries and don't really contribute too much to the economy itself. So yeah, it's a lot more interesting, and I wish I knew more of the history of particularly around that time where Central America were trying to get themselves up and compete with the United States. But of course, the United States weren't going to have that. So they spent that, I think you call it the policy of whispers, where America would go around and talk to all the presidents and say, look, you know what Nicaraguans saying about Honduras, you know what else? And the whole thing fell apart without anything being fired, just on a series of whispers from the US. So very interesting tactics.
That strategy still works today, though.
But hopefully you saw my love for the stationery and for the country, and and I think I would be keen on the Honduras and the Salvadorians to see if their material was made by the Dymark, Rudolph Lobenheimer, because I'm sure he had a lot more relationships with Hamilton Banknote and possibly with other firms as well, because there was quite a few printers around that time. It'd be interesting to really do some work on that, but it's nice to see those discoveries.
Great, there is another hand there. Sergio Bendek.
Hi, Glenn, and thank you for the presentation. I'm also from Honduras, and I collect civic from Honduras. Do you mention, or I missed, why do you call them business envelopes? Or is just the name of for the envelopes now, or you call them a lot of business envelopes?
Sorry, I'm just missing that last part of the question.
Why do you call them business envelopes?
Oh, okay. So because there was a local rate 5 centavo standard letter, 15 grams. Then there was the foreign rate standard letter. So people would write, but normally business people used longer paperwork and folded it 3 times. So we call them the business envelopes because typically only businesses use that style of envelope to send to other businesses typically. And you find the governmental, if it was any government forms, that they would also, they didn't want to fold them 6 times to put them into a standard envelope. They wanted to only fold 3 times because these often were official documents. So it's just a generic term that we use in the study group as business envelopes because they were never used by locals. And, you know, it's 30 odd post offices with 500 envelopes. They didn't go everywhere. So most of them would have been Corinto, Leon, Granada, Managua, you know, the standard business cities that would have got the post offices that would have got those envelopes.
Okay, thank you.
And that's why I'm surprised the Bluefield one actually had some of the business envelopes. But then Bluefield was, you know, the Mosquito Coast. It was there was good businesses up there, so it makes sense down the track.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Guillermo.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, Glenn, thank you. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. There are a lot of similarities between El Salvador stationery and the Nicaraguan stationery in that period. And as you mentioned, there are some Laubenheimer essays that were produced, especially in the first years. And my question is more related. I understood from your presentation that any stationery design not resembling the postage stamp would be done most probably by Laubenheimer. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So we went through the Laubenheimer's archive sales. So everything in the sales you would say is his because it was in the family archive. And when we compared them to the station, and he only did the stationery, it was all the stationery items that weren't produced the same as the stamps. So we believe that if it was same as the stamps, it was in-house, it would have been the in-house engraver. But if it was different, and by looking at the archives, and that's why one of them is unadopted essays, because we know from his archives that he produced it, but it was never used on the stamps, on the envelopes. So that's the assumption that we're making, and I think that it looks true that if it's not the same as the stamps, then he definitely did it. But looking back through the catalogue of his sales gives us a good indication on what stuff that he did for Hamilton Banknote Company.
Okay.
And if you go back through, so I mean, he produced stuff for banknotes. He produced a lot of stuff was in his archive. It was sold over just to distribute it. So it's not us philatelists that are interested. It's a whole range of other, you know, the banknote people and the card people, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Glenn, on the similarities, I have a question. So you shown this card from the Greater Republic of Central America, and right below it says State of Nicaragua. So I'm assuming that there was a very similar one, state El Salvador and maybe state Honduras.
Mhm.
Now, to Mauricio's question about the mail exchange between Nicaragua and Honduras, even during that time, when they were supposed to be united by a greater, you know, federation, is the mail between the states difficult to find, or that is an exception period?
Look, I think we don't have enough numbers to prove it to find. That's the problem. And I would have thought, but during that 18 months, there would have been a lot of mail traffic going, but you think they would have been encouraging each other to develop businesses together to compete against the United States.
Exactly.
But I think it really did, other than, you know, presidential spin, it really didn't get taken up, taken up. Now, I think El Salvador produced a whole heap of revenue stamps after it all fell apart. So even by the time they'd organized the artwork, etc., the whole thing had fallen apart. And as I said, my postmarkers, a lot in Nicaraguan, by the time they got the postmarkers, the whole thing had fallen apart. So look, I think it was a great idea, and it just really never got off the ground. And I think that's why there's not a lot of postal history between each of those Central American countries.
Thank you. That's a good clarification.
Yeah, to complement Henry, if you allow me, officially the Republic lasted 15 days. They got together in 1895. They signed a treaty, the Treaty of Amapala, and they stated that it was going to be valid starting November 1898. So basically, they started doing all these preparations, and nobody was happy because the capital was going to be in Chinandega, which is in Nicaragua, and each country had to transfer the armies and the weapons to Chinandega. So nobody was really happy about that. And then you got the 1898 issues for El Salvador and Nicaragua with the República Mayor. Honduras did only the revenues, and Mauricio and Sergio can help me there. There was no actual postage stamps. And the whole thing was proclaimed, it existed, but then there was a regime change in El Salvador on around November 11th, if I'm not mistaken, or 12th, and nobody came to help the post-Salvadoran president. So basically, the new president said, we're getting out, and the whole thing collapsed. That's the short story.
So no one was putting their fair share in order to make it work. Actually, seems like okay.
Yeah.
And to add to what Guillermo just said, actually with Sergio, we were just working today with some covers, and we saw a Honduran registration label that says República Mayor or Greater Republic of Central America, which is quite rare. And I believe I sent Guillermo a picture some days ago. That and the revenues that Guillermo mentioned are the only things that have República Mayor de Central America in Honduras. Yeah, that didn't last that much. We have been trying to unify ourselves since 1821, and that never worked out. So it always falls apart.
Okay, well, thanks for that clarification.
Yeah.
Any other question? Rafael.
Yeah. Hi, Glenn. Thanks for the nice talk. Regarding the postcards, the reply postcards, yeah, you're right. If I collect Puerto Rico, never seen the reply ones used. I only send one way, and usually to Germany.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, you mentioned that, and I've seen them always to Germany, only going one way, never both ways. So I had never seen one, and out of for many years looking at it, and never. And I have never met anybody who said that has both. So.
I think that's the holy grail. We're looking for one, and we're members of the UPU, so the country that it's sent back from should honour it. And I haven't even seen half a reply card. What I'd really love is the card that went as well as coming back, but I haven't even seen one from another country back to Nicaragua or internally. The only ones I've seen internally, I believe, is when they tore the cards in half and used them as just singles cards.
I think to Fernanda Poo, I think I seen one time that was used both ways. That's the only one on this Spanish Dominion. Well, thanks.
Yeah.
But the big question is, I'm wondering if the postal users really know that they needed to do that rather than tearing it apart and using it in separately.
That was part of the UPU, really.
Henry, usually they said on the bottom for the response. Well, it was
the
in
fine
French.
print that none of us read.
Yeah,
No, it says
it was
there,
written in French. So if you didn't know French, that was a big problem. But it was
Okay.
the Honduran ones for reply, the ones for overseas, they said response payer, something like that. So
Yeah, but they
yeah,
said
in French.
So there were instructions.
Yeah,
yeah, the
in
one
French.
from Spain, they had them really in Spanish, so not even in French. So
Yeah, even in Peru, I haven't seen any. Those are rare, right? I haven't seen a lot, but the ones that circulate is, you're right, it's only one way, or usually, the top part, the reply part is empty. That was never used for the purpose it was meant to be.
And I think even the Nicaraguan post office didn't realize, because they would backstamp the empty card as well, and they shouldn't have done that. They should have they've only stamped the one that was being posted, but not knowing, they just put a stamp on, postmark on both. So
Yeah.
I think the education of the postal worker wasn't that good.
Yep.
thanks.
Anybody else with a question for Glenn? I don't see anybody else. No hands. Okay, with that, then, Glenn, thanks again. It was a fantastic presentation. We don't have very many on Nicaragua, so you have the honor to give us one very comprehensive one. Actually, I recall 2 or 3 at the most. It's the country that hasn't been touched too much, so
Yeah,
at least here in the Oficina.
look, thank you very much for allowing me to share it, because you guys are all high-powered philatelists. I've seen a lot of your exhibits. I know what you guys do, so it's a real privilege to be involved here. And thank you very much for allowing me, and thank you for allowing me to do it in English as well.
That's perfect. We need to expand, and we know that English is the universal language. So we are committed to make it happen that way now. So thank you for helping us with it. Perfect. Y el día de mañana.